Hi, I'm Anita Barbee, and I'm from the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky at the School of Social Work, and I'm a professor there. And the reason I'm here at the CQI conference this year is to talk about how to create a CQI process for workforce in mostly child welfare, because that's the area I work in the most, but it's applicable to other human services like probation. And the points that I'm trying to make here over the next few days is that, first of all, there's a huge problem with child welfare turnover. Anywhere from 20 to 40% of workers are walking out the door every year in child welfare systems across the nation, and it's really almost a crisis level. And what that really means is that for every worker who walks out, there's about $60,000 in investment that also walks out with them. So for example, in the state of Kentucky, if 300 people leave our state every year who've come in to be trained and oriented to the child welfare position, that means that $18 million has walked out the door with them. And so we could really use those dollars for having more services for the families that we're trying to serve. And so our point is, how can we change what we're doing in our systems to track what's going on with who's being recruited, how we're doing the selection process, who's really most suited for our jobs based on what traits we find in the interviews, and then what folks, who stays and who leaves, using that data, that CQI process, that data to tell us maybe who should we hone in on more, and maybe who we should nurture more to be able to stay in the agency, and just use those pieces of information at the front end, as well as once people are in the agency, doing like stay interviews, what's making you want to stay, and how can we help you through some of the tough spots, and then as people exit, get some information about why they're leaving, so that we can use that information to improve supervision or the organizational culture and climate, or the resources in the agency that are maybe driving people away, or maybe just the stress of the job and the work itself and the trauma that our clients are experiencing. Those are the kinds of things we're trying to help people think through. What kind of data do we need to gather, and how can we feed that data back into the system to improve it, so that we slow down this turnover crisis in child welfare? And so some of the kinds of pieces of information, one of the groups that I work for is the Children's Bureau funds the Quality Improvement Center for Workforce Development. And what we're finding in 8 sites across the nation is we're doing needs assessments on workforce, and then installing 8 different interventions to see if we can stave off turnover and see the impact of that increased retention on outcomes for children. What we're seeing is that our systems aren't necessarily set up to gather the kind of data that we need to be able to understand our workforce issues, nor are we gathering data along the way to feed that back so that we can improve what's going on, much less do particular interventions. It would really help if our HR departments, if we had a closer relationship with those folks, and set up their databases in such a way that we can extract important information about who's coming to us, and then again relating that to who's staying, but having a linking function of being able to link the data about the employees who come in and as they move through the agency, and also linking that to our outcome data, our child welfare data, to show who is doing the best kind of work, who's performing the best, and who's reaching the greatest outcomes, and then having other kinds of data added, like survey data about satisfaction, and like I said, those exit interviews and stay interviews, and using that to see what it is that we can do to change these trajectories. A second piece of information that we need to build this CQI process for the workforce in child welfare, and maybe other human services too, is to make sure we're all measuring turnover in the same way. And there's lots of different ways to do it. But if we could come across maybe a national standard or a best practice of how to do that, then we're talking about turnover and trying to learn from each other across the nation. We are using the same kinds of terms, so that would be a helpful piece. One of the ways of looking at turnover that I think would be helpful, that would improve this CQI process, would be to track people across time, looking at cohorts of people as they come into the agency, maybe January of 2020, and follow that cohort through to see when do people leave. Because it may be that people leave early on because they didn't really understand the job, and they leave before training's over because they're like, this is too much for me, I can't do it. Or maybe there's another cohort that leaves when the caseload gets full, and they say, I can't do this much work, I'm getting out of here. Or they leave at the 1-year mark because their mother told them, you have to be in a job for at least a year, otherwise you look like a flake. And then if we can understand those critical points of leaving, we might be able to put in some realistic job previews in the interview process, so we don't hire people who aren't suited or who don't want to do this job, rather than waiting until we've trained them and spent thousands of dollars on that. Or maybe we do graduated caseloads, so that as people come into the agency, we don't give them a full caseload too soon. We figure out what is the exact proportion or the time that it takes for people to master the job to receive this full caseload, and we get them past that critical period so that they stay with us. Or maybe at the 1-year mark, we do something special around some special training or leadership development or career path counseling, so that they can see their path in the future if they stay with the agency, and how that might help them to stick with us. So these are the kinds of pieces of information that we think would really help, and what we're promoting in the talks over the next 2 days. Thank you very much for your time. Hope to see you all again soon.